Hello and welcome to today's episode of Focus Atlanta. I am your host, Keisha Lancelin. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our entire show today is about fire safety, fire prevention, and fire education. I'm going to begin with the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation and the Executive Director, Mr. Dennis Gardin. Dennis, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice to finally have you here.
Well, it's good to be here. It's good to have this opportunity, this format, to kind of talk a little bit about safety and prevention.
Let's talk first about the mission of the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation. What do you all do?
Well, the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation was founded in 1982 by a couple of DeKalb County firefighters who just wanted to help and do something at the Grady Burn Center. And they raised a couple of nickels and was able to buy a few pieces of equipment, and they really enjoyed that so much till they decided to do a little bit more. And the more they tried to help, the more firefighters got involved, and it grew to the Metro Atlanta Firefighters Burn Foundation, to the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation, and now we're supported by fire departments all across the state. And our mission is actually to partner with the fire service and burn care community to provide safety and prevention education, assist burn centers, and support burn survivors in their journey of recovery.
Wonderful. How long have you been involved with the foundation?
I've been executive director for about 4 years now, but prior to that I've been a volunteer for the foundation for about 15 years, I guess. Yeah, so it's really a labor of love for me.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your experience. Tell us about your burn.
Well, I got burned as a kid. I got burned in a motorcycle explosion when I was 14 years old, being very careless with gasoline, and decided to take a motorcycle in my parents' home to repair it so that I could be out riding and having fun, and really just didn't consider the bad choice that I made. And as a result of that, I received burns over 70% of my body and put me in the hospital for 8 months. And for a 14-year-old, that was a different kind of experience. And I thought being in the hospital for 8 months and having over 50 surgeries and dealing with a lot of pain and suffering, I thought that life couldn't get any worse than that. And I was soon to find out things were going to get worse after I was discharged, because I was discharged with an entirely different physical appearance, and life was never going to be the same as I once knew it. And I guess being with the Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation, that's why it's a labor of love, because I understand what fire can do to a person physically, but I also saw what it did to my family. And we use the term burn survivor at the Burn Foundation, not burn victim. And I think it's very important to say survivor as opposed to victim, because I was victimized by the injury, but I'm a survivor because I recognized and began to work towards life after the burn. And there were no foundations when I got burned, because it was about 40 years ago, so there were no mechanisms in place for the aftercare piece. But with the Burn Foundation, we do have things in place to fire is always going to happen. Burns are always going to occur, but we kind of step in to kind of help people get back on track and really recognize that there is life after the burn.
Let's talk a little bit about your quality of life as a child burn survivor. What was that like for you?
Well, as a child burn survivor, I guess I would have to say I was a victim, because after 8 months of hospitalization, I went home and I hid in the house for 2 years. You know, as a 15-year-old, the most important thing in your world is fitting in. And having this different physical appearance, I didn't think that I would ever fit in. And I'm not sure if I even wanted to, because I felt I was a monster, and I hid for 2 years, and I didn't see other people like me. So I thought I was the only person in the world that had gone through this, and probably those feelings of loneliness were the most painful and difficult aspect of the entire journey, feeling that I was the only one in the world going through this. And at the Burn Foundation, we have a children's burn camp called Camp Uyula, and it's an annual camp it's a week-long camping experience for kids who've experienced a burn injury. And we bring about 100 kids together every year just to have the camp experience. And it takes about 120 volunteers to make this thing happen. And most of our volunteers are firefighters from across the state. And we call it fun with a purpose. You know, there's hiking and swimming and bike riding, all of those things. But there are also opportunities for these kids to talk to other kids who have a shared similar experience and be an encouragement to each other, because no one can speak to a child who's gone through this like another child who's experienced it. And they create a bond and a support network for them. So we call it fun with a purpose. And it really speaks to the kids and let them know that there is life after the burn and you can continue to go on. But it's also important for the firefighters who volunteer as well, because it's validating for them, because oftentimes they pull people out of burning structures or cars, and particularly kids. and they send them off to the hospital, and they do wonder, how's that person doing? Did I really do that child a favor because he was so severely burned? And I think those guys being at camp, they can see these kids running around, not hiding their scars, in swim trunks, limbs missing and falling, and water fights and water pistols and those kinds of things. And it says, we did the right thing. We did the right thing.
In terms of supporting the Firefighters Burn Foundation, what can we do as a community? Do you all have a website that talks a little bit about camp, that talks a little bit about the support that you provide?
Yeah, we do have a website, and that website is www.gfbf.org, and we call it Good Friend, Best Friend, but it really stands for Georgia Firefighters Burn Foundation.org. And we have tons and tons of information on there about ways people can support us, about the volunteer opportunities, because we're a statewide agency. And there are almost 700 different fire departments across the state that we are involved with all of them. And we have a fairly small staff, but we do manage to make it happen. But we do know that we only exist because of all those volunteers who step in and really give us a hand. And those guys that are out there with the boot, the firefighters doing the boot drive every year, that's where a lion's share of our financial support comes from. And it doesn't matter how good the programs are or how effective the services are. If we don't have the financing to support that, it just doesn't happen. And we've been fortunate that people recognize the importance of the work that we do, the mission that's being met, because they do tend to support that. Because fire, unlike other things, no one's immune to it.
Right.
And it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. Fire can occur in anyone's life, and that's a sad reality. But it's really important that we're there to kind of provide that support after it occurs. But we do have the prevention and piece ahead. Going back to when I was a child, the firefighters used to come into the school all the time, and they talk about stop, drop, and roll. And to be honest, I really wasn't interested. I was more interested in sitting in the back of the class, messing with those little girls in the back of the class. But they continued to come on a regular basis. And when this explosion occurred, the first thing popped in my mind was stop, drop, and roll. And I didn't think that I was even hearing those lessons. And I say that as an encouragement to those educators out there, because prevention really is the front line of the fire service, and it really does make a difference, even though it gets rather frustrating sometimes, because you didn't think I was listening, but I really was, and I'm thankful for that too.
Thank you, Dennis, for coming on the show and sharing all this information. It has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you guys for having us. So people can log onto the website or call into the office, and we'd be more than happy to take those calls.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
and
for having
thank you
us.
guys for tuning in to today's episode of Focus Atlanta. Again, I'm your host, Keisha Lancelin. Please stay tuned for more about fire prevention, fire education here on CW69.